And I think as we sort of transition into this environment that we're in, that we were talking about a minute ago, I think our evolution is really to be the HR platform of the future. HR doesn't have an Amazon.com kind of a platform. It doesn't have a Twitch. People are dealing with ERP and these technologies that are, frankly, just kind of 20 or 30 years of, relative, just kind of stagnation. There's not a lot of new stuff there. And so I think it's this unique opportunity to bring the best of mobile technology, some of the best e-commerce, yield management, travel algorithms, a lot of the just great, super highly scalable internet technologies, and bring them to bear in HR, in the people part, core part of the enterprise.
Welcome to episode 53 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features Jason Radisson, a social entrepreneur known as a serial unicorn breeder. His current focus is Shift One, where they work to solve the world's largest employment gaps with technology. Jason spent time at McKinsey, Uber, and more, and was the COO at 99 Taxis and a major driver in their growth and eventual exit to Didi Chuxing. Jason and I discussed the journey from a tough rural upbringing to being a seasoned entrepreneur and making jobs more accessible and people-focused. Here is Jason Radisson on People Are the Answer. Jason, thanks so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
Thanks, Jeff. Pleasure to be here.
Love it if you could just start off by telling us who you are and your current role.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jason Radisson. I am CEO and founder of a company called Shift One. We're a venture-backed labor marketplace and HR software provider.
And in life in general, what would you say motivates you?
In general, what motivates me is having a positive impact on the world with technology, applying technology to really big problems. In my career, they've mainly been around labor and improving work opportunities and skill levels for as many people as possible. And that's very much in line with the company that I'm building now.
Great. Well, I look forward to digging into that company shortly. But could you just tell me, where did you grow up and what was it like there?
I grew up in a hill town in western Massachusetts, a little town called Munson, not far from Sturbridge and 84 and 90. If you guys know that part of the world, sort of halfway between Boston and New York City.
Got it. Absolutely. And what was it like growing up there?
Pretty rural. It was a long time ago. I kind of literally grew up 3 miles up a dirt road between what had been old dairy farms in a pretty rural community.
So, a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs come from the Bay Area. This sounds like a very different place to grow up. How early did you start getting interested in tech?
Kind of really early on. I would say, I'm a bit older. I have a lot of analog memories. We didn't have the internet until I was in college, which is maybe a little different from, a lot of sort of the newer generation of entrepreneurs. But I would say throughout, technology has really been a part of it. I think, we had very early on, we had a lot of PCs in the kind of work that I did. And I was always working in school, all along from middle school on up with like my first fruit picking jobs and paper routes and things like that. And then as I started to work in companies in high school, we already had desktop kind of computers and some S400s and some mainframe systems that we're using for data crunching and kind of data analysis. And that really is, so those are some of my first tech experiences. And I think, more broadly speaking, later on in my career, as I sort of got new skills, I think a big part of what the innovation that I've been doing for the last, let's call it 20, 25 years has been really around putting technology into really big real world problems. And I think, my sort of general thesis on entrepreneurialism is, we are largely, we're doing, sort of second level innovation. Few of us are actually out there sort of, splitting the atom, doing first primary R&D. We're more seeing these opportunities where a part of the world could really benefit from technology, then taking some technology from a different place and sort of synthesizing that into this new application in the world. And that's very much been, sort of my role. A lot of my career was literally implementing algorithms and automation into new parts of the economy. Whether it's yield management systems, whether collaborative filtering, some other just really large kind of algorithmically scaling applications and taking them from one part of the economy and kind of putting them into another really big business problem.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've gotten into some pretty incredible things, and I want to zoom back out a little bit more. And I learned a little bit about your story prior to our recording, and I saw that you grew up with a young single mother, and really had to watch your mom, sort of struggle to make things ends meet. And how did that sort of inspire you?
Yeah, I think it's a very different childhood, and I think some of the real learnings, takeaways, and sort of things that you get through osmosis is when you grow up, in those circumstances, you get an exposure to work, and I think it ends up sort of imprinting a work ethic on you, and definitely, if you're growing up in the right kind of community, you're definitely just kind of sensing that. We could have gone a very different path, and yet we didn't. And I think the main reason is we had a really strong work ethic, and those around us had a really strong work ethic. So, it's and I think entrepreneurialism, there's sort of a corollary, which is, it's about you doing something hard, and there's a lot of change management involved, and particularly for a social entrepreneur and having sort of broader societal impact. And it's really about sort of putting one foot in front of the other and carrying on. Look at the times we're in now. This is all about carrying on. This is what we do, and I think that work ethic and that sort of these times are hard, but better times will come, and you're not going to see better times, and you're not going to have opportunities if you don't maximize sort of what you're doing now and put the hard work in.
You mentioned the hard work that you were exposed to and the work ethic. And I know you worked a variety of blue collar jobs, from short order cook to HVAC technician to fund your schooling. Can you talk a little bit about how those experiences impacted you for the long term?
Yeah, very much. I think one of the most important things that you sort of get in that experience is very early on, you get a real sort of market sense around education, and it's not something hypothetical. And I think in our system, for a lot of people, it can remain hypothetical for quite some time. You can get all the way through undergraduate, and then you can even go to grad school right afterwards, and you can literally get through 25, 27 years of life without really having a good market sense of your skills. And when you're sort of upskilling your way through life and bootstrapping your way through life, you kind of have a sense at all times. There are some downsides to that. It's hard being, the work study kid and the kid kind of working full time in different school situations. But, the trade-off is literally that. It's you really get to value, I did this finance course, and then, 2 weeks later, you're applying it in your very real job. And you get a sense of the career path there, and the value that you're providing in that work environment. And it's very immediate feedback when you're working in in a real world thing, blue collar or white collar, while you're going to school, I think.
And after you went to college, what was sort of your first move from there?
Yeah. Well, college was, I think I had a fair sense of, sort of the skills I had gotten and kind of where I was at. And I took a Fulbright scholarship right out of school and got to do a little bit of grad work. And I also, I had a side job and had some real world business experience during that fellowship. And I think like a lot of fellowships, like you have a very small stipend. It's really hard to kind of get by, particularly if your parents don't have a lot of extra cash to sort of subsidize you. And so I kind of had this experience of working in business. My Fulbright was in Germany. I had a U.S. manufacturing company that was paying me to do projects on the side. So I worked a few hours a week for them. And those were really my very first experiences. And then I went to work for that company full-time after I finished my Fulbright year. And for me, I had sort of an international general manager role. I did some marketing, I did some sales, I did some operations. I was responsible for a market, one market, then another market, and I worked for that company for a number of years before going back to grad school. And for me, grad school was, I got to a certain point and I thought, I've sort of maxed out where I can be as a general manager. I've had these early general manager experiences. I think for the next level, I'm going to need more technical skills. I'm really interested in, some of the broader tech and some of the broader math. And I think, back in the day, as I put together my grad school program, I think if I were doing it all over again, I think I would probably do it more in like an operations research kind of a background. I kind of had a bit more of a homegrown one. I went to school as a graduate student in economics with applied math, which was leading very much in an academic direction. And, for me, there was sort of this catalyzing moment. I was kind of, had been working for a number of years as a grad student, teaching assistant on the side, research assistant on the side. I had just a fantastic offer from McKinsey to join McKinsey. So I dropped out of grad school and went to work for McKinsey. I think at that point, I had just barely enough technical skills to kind of get by as a McKinsey associate and to kind of, get started. And it was just, really an amazing experience all the way around. Worked for them for a number of years on big international projects where, that was really the name of the game. I was working in these large scale labor projects, post-merger management, trying to figure out in particular, like in the telecoms industry, how to work with tens of thousands of field engineering resources and field technician resources, and how to optimize things and optimize processes for some of the biggest telecoms companies in the world. And it just kind of, really hit a number of skill areas that I had been developing and a number of interests that I had. And there was a lot of tech involved, for back then. And, it was really sort of the launch pad for everything else that came in my career.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was a really good opportunity to try out different things and learn a lot about a lot of different things and sort of point you in a new direction.
Yeah, very much.
So, one of the roles that you're known for is your role at Uber. What was the path from when your time at McKinsey to eventually being at Uber?
Yeah, well, I mean, there were a few years between there, for sure. I would say, that type of post-merger work and just M&A in general post-merger work was a lot of what I did for kind of the 10 years in between. So, I think what is particularly interesting about post-merger work, or at least back in the day, and I worked on some really big ones. I worked on the roll-up of AT&T. I worked in the casino industry with Gary Loveman and the Harrah's guys. Rolling up Horseshoe, World Series of Poker, Caesars Entertainment, all of those different properties. What was really cool is, you kind of take generally, one company's technology, and in a way, they're these massive change management projects because generally, you've got a company of 100,000 people acquiring a company of 100,000 people. And, you know, and not too different from how things are today. A lot of times the reason that company is acquiring is because their processes, their tech is better. And, you know, on one level or another, it doesn't mean that the acquired company doesn't have a good strategy and isn't successful. It just means that, you know, there's a differentiator there, and, you know, a lot of the value that's created is in that transformation of the acquired company. And it was really, really cool work and really transformative work. And, you know, I think those were all great life skills. And I think what is really kind of interesting, was very catalyzing with mobile, was we got to this point with mobile marketplaces where, you know, it sort of, technology had been more for business processes and more kind of in the ERP desktop world. And then all of a sudden it could be transformative in these massive consumer businesses. And so for me, that was sort of kind of right in my wheelhouse. You know, you had the opportunity to literally create workforces. You know, in our heyday in Newberg, we were adding, you know, in a city, in a decent city, we would add 5,000 workers a week. And when you look across, you know, any kind of talent acquisition metrics out there in the world, like, it's just phenomenal operations, and, you know, or more very tight operations, phenomenal technology, and the combination of the two just gave you this huge lever to be out there transforming cities. And, you know, I think for me, you know, I do consider myself a social entrepreneur. I think one of the greatest things about the experience too was, like, literally in ride sharing, you know, and there were a number of academic papers around this validating it, but, like, you would see the standard of living in neighborhoods where there was a concentration of drivers. You'd see the standard of living rise. The standard of living would go up 5,000 per household, 6,000, 7,000 per household, like meaningful increase in standard of living. And that was the kind of opportunity that we were able to present.
Yeah, that it's really interesting to look back on that and think about what you went through. I mean, those various industries that you worked in M&A, I mean, you must have learned such a tremendous amount, and it, I imagine, has added so much to your projects that you've done since then.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it does, you know, you end up with a very sort of real world pragmatic approach to things, because you kind of got to, you know, it's rare and unique, I think, in corporate life, because, you know, the projects are time boxed. You know, they're very value oriented, and they're not, you know, they're sort of, a lot of the project parameters are known. So it really ends up being very much about just optimizing execution on, you know, kind of on a given board. You kind of know what the moves need to be, and you get very good at optimizing around those. And I think it really served well. Like, you know, I had a second experience in ride sharing at 99 Taxis when I went to Brazil to be chief operating officer there. And, you know, I think we were able, you know, one, Brazil's a very different market and was just a great fit for ride sharing. But two, you know, I was sort of, my team and I were able to kind of roll out in a very optimized way, because we kind of already knew a number of the playbooks. We benefited from the Uber playbooks. We had Didi Xuxing from China on our board. We had kind of recently taken a big investment from them. And we were able to use some of the Chinese playbooks, you know, that they had been working with so effectively, you know, back in their home markets. And we got to a place in Brazil where we were extremely, extremely efficient. And I think a lot of that also is sort of, it's somewhat on those same rails as the M&A post-merger management. You just get, you know, into this groove of, like, yeah, we know how to implement these playbooks. They're highly optimized, and off you go. You know, not too dissimilar, like launching a city in some ways, to me, was a little bit of an echo of, like, converting a casino property, like taking a Flamingo or a Caesar's Palace and converting it to new systems and new ways of working and implementing new playbooks in the same way that we had in post-merger management. So, yeah, I think very much kind of an echo of that work.
To go a little deeper into your rideshare experience, when did you join Uber, and what was sort of the status of the company when you got there?
I joined in the middle part of last decade, so not early, but not mid or late, somewhere sort of mid or early, I guess I would say. We had launched for the most part most of North America. So my role was to launch and to run Nevada in particular. That's what I was hired for. Then I was part of the West Coast leadership team, and we had a number of smaller markets to fill in, but really the last big market in the United States was Nevada, and in particular Las Vegas, because a lot of the kind of regulatory challenges that we'd been having in Nevada. It was a company that was still small enough that we ran it off of basically a Tuesday morning meeting. We had kind of a company-wide ops review Tuesday morning. We'd all get on kind of a big conference call and talk through everything. But small enough to do that, but big enough that, other countries were already well established, at least, kind of Western Europe was well established, some things like that. China was kind of the heat of the ride sharing wars there. It was, somewhere in that scale up.
Yeah. And on the Nevada side in particular, did you have to deal a lot with trying to change the policy? That's something that I work a lot in, is policy change, mostly drug policy and criminal justice reform myself. But particularly in this case, I know Uber ran into a bunch of regulatory issues, but I also know that Nevada was notoriously difficult.
What can I say? Police and ski masks, difficult, impounded cars and arrested drivers and all the rest. Yeah. It was challenging, and I guess what I can say. What I can say publicly is it was a lot of work. We had an amazing policy team supporting us, and then just great kind of ground operations around policy. And, at the end of the day, the state really came down to, and I'm not, active particularly in Nevada these days, but it really came down to, sort of 20 or 30 decision makers at the state level that, we sort of actively were working with to get things to sort of go our way. And when they finally did go our way, it was, still, there were some challenges, but things sort of line up quickly. It's a very, I would say, because of the tourism industry and everything, once you've sort of got green lights, it was a really pleasant state to run, and, great group of folks to work with. But it was challenging. It was challenging for, a good 6 months or a year, getting everything lined up.
So you got this really great experience in an up and coming space, and that eventually led you to become the chief operating officer of 99 Taxis in Brazil that you mentioned. How did you end up there, and tell us about that experience?
Yeah, I think, so Latin America had been, a market that I had worked in, from early on, from really my first days at McKinsey. And I had a lot of contacts, and I was interested in the ecosystem. And I think in particular, you kind of got two main ecosystems in tech. You've got the Brazilian ecosystem, and then you've got the ecosystem around Colombia. And so, for me, I think if you just kind of look at back then and at ride sharing globally, Latin America, and in particular Brazil, was one of the markets that made the most sense. And I think about this, I'm maybe a little bit different in terms of how I think about product market fit as an entrepreneur, in the sense that, I think one key variable is market. Like, your product is the product, and you're making this product for a market, but the market is also something that's relatively fungible. And, I think what we saw in ride sharing was really the best, most efficient market. And I've said this before, I mentioned this before publicly, but like the best, really best market in the world at the time was secondary Brazilian cities. And I'm talking these kind of 5 million, 7 million, thereabouts cities in Brazil, places like Belo Horizonte, places like Porto Alegre, Curitiba, cities that, just have a super abundant driver pool and, a very, very strong middle class, upper middle class that is super time crunched. And it's Latin America and traffic's crazy and, life is hectic. And so the product just fit absolutely perfectly. And we were super well supplied and we were just super efficient in everything that we did. We had great efficiency ratios in the sense of like, broadly speaking, in our first $1 billion of revenue, it took us $50 million of burn to get to $1 billion of revenue. It's we look at that metric all the time in platform businesses. That's a 20 ratio. That's a fantastic ratio, kind of globally. I mean, some places in the US and Uber, we were, a ratio of 1, a ratio of 2. So, those kind of efficiencies, A, like you got to have the team and the playbooks and you got to execute really well. But B, it doesn't hurt if the product just fits the market beautifully as it did in Brazil. So it's a long way of saying just, kind of Brazil was the right place to be in ride sharing at that time. And, I certainly recognized it, wanted to be a part of what was going on in Brazil, and the opportunity at 99 Taxis was just amazing.
I know it's been a few years, but what do you think about the current state of the rideshare space?
Tough.
Yeah.
Tough. Yeah. I guess I would answer it with a solution. I think, great question. I think I would, in this day and age, I think there is a profitable ride sharing company to be done. I would very much pick markets. And I think that's a little bit of what, sort of the traditional venture-backed approach where you start in the market that's where the team is, and then you expand out from there, and you kind of test product market fit, and then you expand. You start in New York City with a black car service, and then you get into cabs and or peer-to-peer and, in those big metros in the US. Like, I think that model, I understand why it's comfortable in the sense of like, you can wrap your head around it. You can go and touch the operations. You can see how everything's going. But, per like what we were just talking about, the product might actually fit, 1 million times better in a market that's, 5,000 miles away. And, maybe the best answer for the team is get on a plane and go rent some Airbnbs in that market and go live there for a year. And you see that a little bit, in Latin America and with what is going on in particular in the Colombian ecosystem, because, let's face it, Bogota and, a couple of other Medellin and Cali aren't necessarily the best markets in all of Latin America. So often, you've got a lot of entrepreneurial talent in the big cities in Colombia. Often the team will literally get on a plane and go live in Mexico City or go live in Sao Paulo or somewhere else for a year while they're really sort of getting the product market fit and put themselves into a more favorable market than maybe they would have at home. So I think that's a little bit missing in a lot of the approach. And if I look at ride sharing now, I think if ride sharing had had more of a, let's actually find the right market for this solution first, it would have a lot better track record and a lot better reputation than it does.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to look at it. And, I saw that it looks like you started Shift One while still at 99 Taxis. And is that what led you to leave the rideshare space because you were focused on Shift One, or was it something else?
No, it was actually slightly after. I incubated it a bit in 2019. And, I think sort of founding, we exited from we sold 99 taxis to Didi Chuxing. It was that's another story. That was a wonderful experience as well. And certainly for the Brazilian ecosystem, kind of one of the first and biggest, kind of unicorn exits that the ecosystem had. So it was great on a number of levels. But anyway, I incubated the idea, and it was sort of my initial intent was I'd like to actually take the best of gig technology and apply it in a way that sort of is more of a win-win for workers and employers, and sort of gets people on a better career path than casual driving. And not that there's anything wrong with casual driving or full-time professional driving, but just if you look at sort of the job quality and sort of the career path, there's literally nowhere to go.
There's better industries to implement these solutions where they can change lives more, right?
Yeah. That's right. And so that was the intent with Shift One, was like, let's take gig technology and some of the playbooks and let's apply them to manufacturing and logistics. And we did a little bit of experimenting in 2019, and then a couple of us went full time in early 2020, January, like right before the pandemic. And then, the rest is kind of history. We were, just caught the wave and had a tremendous tailwind, kind of working in manufacturing logistics, in particular on the logistics side. And then on the manufacturing side, we got into a lot of food production during the early part of the pandemic and other things that we built the company on.
I mean, what an incredible time, like you were saying, to be involved in filling employment gaps. It has to have been a really interesting ride. And I like the way in one of your either websites or social media, as I saw it described as solving the world's largest employment gaps with technology. And I just liked how succinct that is. And so, yeah, I would love to just learn a little bit more specifically about what it is that Shift One does and what your motivation was for making this happen.
Yeah, sure. So, broadly speaking, we help fill employment gaps with a end-to-end platform. And we have this end-to-end platform that's unique in the world in the sense that it's geared for really large workforces. So I think if you look at the HR tech space, one of the sort of major gaps out there is mostly the tools are built for supporting manual processes. They're sort of tech enablement for manual processes and kind of traditional approaches. When we looked at the space, it became clear to us that, no one had really implemented a big end-to-end solution that could handle all of the different challenges that you have when you have tens of thousands of employees. So we built the platform with that in mind. Some of the major functions are around, sort of onboarding, hiring and onboarding people in a very automated way, checking credentials, doing background checks, doing all of the usual screens. And we've got it to a point where it's super low friction. So people just, input a little bit of data and then everything happens kind of in the background. Some of the other places are, we have kind of this end-to-end smart scheduling, timekeeping payroll solution that just takes a lot of the, manual and spreadsheet work out of, kind of traditional operations. People can just, at both sides of it, our workforce has an app, and then supervisors have an app on a tablet on their phone, and everybody's able to sort of, in a very kind of massive and real-time way, be in touch with each other and get visibility into what all the teams are doing, what all the individuals are doing across the enterprise. So that's really the solution that we built, and our clients are using it to get a handle on overtime expenses, to reduce time fraud, to have better utilization of their teams, these kinds of things that are just, I think, particularly in the environment we're in, it not only helps with like acquiring your workforce, but it helps to actually retain and get more out of the workforce that you have. And I think that's really been the evolution over the course of the pandemic. In the early part of the pandemic, it was just like, oh my God, we need people. Can we get people? How can we get people? And so we were doing a lot of outsourcing and a lot of services work. And now as things have evolved, it's more, people are trying to make do with the smaller experienced team that they have, recognizing that, let's face it, there are less people joining the workforce and there are more people retiring than there ever were. You're just going to have less workers, skilled or unskilled, to work with. So you've got to get better utilization, and do more upskilling and just work more closely with the team that you already have. And that's really where the solution comes into play. And, we think it's, so far, we've got a ton of differentiation versus kind of traditional HR tools, which, really are just more there to support HR processes. They don't sort of get into, team utilization and a lot of these more pressing business needs in this environment.
And given how the organization has evolved these days, what type of company would you say is your ideal or average client?
Yeah, definitely. It's a company with a large frontline workforce. So whether they are field technicians, field engineers, whether they are nurses, whether they are manufacturing personnel like machine operations folks, machine operators, forklift drivers in logistics, folks that are working with a massive workforce in person. That's really our ideal client. And particularly, like, we tend to interact with this combination of operations and HR. It's that problem is generally owned by multiple people in an enterprise, and that's really, those are generally our clients are two or three of those leaders who really kind of own the frontline workforce problem.
We've had previously on the podcast, we've had the founder of an awesome organization called Free World. Jason Wang is the guy's name. And Free World is basically creating fair chance hiring opportunities for people that have been recently incarcerated, have records. Right now, they're very much focused on the trucking industry, but they plan to expand from there. And I wonder if there's a partnership to be had between a Free World and Shift One, where they perhaps are bringing this particular population to your platform.
Yeah, and would welcome the conversation, and we definitely, I think philosophically and practically speaking, we work with clients, we work with employers who are open to sort of non-traditional candidate pools and talent pools out there, and definitely we try to provide a fair chance to people who have a criminal background, and have been through the system and are now looking for opportunities.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll be sure to connect to you guys. I think that could be really interesting, and it's incredible to see the impact that you guys have already been able to make in such a short period of time. And it's such an important issue in our society right now is labor. And it's cool to see the way that you guys are making a dent in it and the systematic and efficient way that you're doing so. And so congratulations on where you've gotten with that platform, and, wishing you all the growth and success in the future with it. If you're enjoying this episode, I would greatly appreciate if you could review, like, comment, or subscribe on your favorite platforms. Your engaged support goes a long way in helping the show grow and getting our impactful guests heard. Now back to the show. And so, I know Shift One is really the focus right now, but you've worked on, and invested in many startups. Are there any particular parts of that journey that have been, highlights you want to share?
Oh boy, I'd have to think about that.
And I'll add that, I've read that you've been known as a serial unicorn breeder, which is quite the thing to have said about yourself, given where tech has been recently. And so just really curious if you have a secret sauce or any favorites you want to tell us about.
Yeah, I mean, so many playbooks. I think it's one of the things that in platform marketplace companies that we've gotten particularly good at. Like, once you get to a certain model, you improve the model, you tweak the model, but you can say, starting a city with Rappi or starting a city with Uber is a certain thing, and the practices improve, and we're working in startups, so it's not like these are ISO 9000 documented processes. They're a little bit more evolving, but all that said, it's a tremendous way to execute, and extremely efficient, and there's a bunch of stuff there, and probably too much to really. That's a whole separate set of conversations. We probably, in a decent rollout, we probably have about 50 playbooks at play. So there's just all kinds of stuff that the couple of thousand of us that have been doing this for the last 10 years have developed. What I would say is, I think on a very kind of meta level, I think it's extremely important that you take the viability of the business and the efficiency of the business very, very, very. Let's give it a high priority and put it kind of front and center, even if it doesn't feel that way in the business cycle, because eventually the bill kind of always comes. There have been, we went through cycles, sort of when WeWork had their difficulties. A lot of companies out in the world were going through unit economics, fire drills, and trying to get to profitability and doing things then. It seems to be every 5, 6, 7 years that we have these different swings. So, I think that's a big part of it, is sort of like learning not just to become a growth person, but learning to become a very lean and efficient growth person is really kind of key. I think some of the underpinnings of that are, there's a cultural bias that we kind of have in tech companies, which is like, it's kind of an engineering bias of, if something is doable 1 or 2 times manually, then figuring out a way to automate it, kind of, continually improving the kind of core operations as you're building the company, which leads you to this very efficient scaling process. You're, figuring something out manually, very quickly automating it for where you are, then improving on the automation, then improving on the scalability. So there are a number of practices there, and that's sort of, I think, the most universal way that I could put it. And then, as I sort of, with the unicorns that I have helped scale, it's sort of implementing, knowing kind of where you are and viewing kind of both product market fit and the maturity of the playbooks, and then sort of working quickly with a number of distributed teams to quickly kind of iterate through that and get them really, really dialed in. We were able to, in 99 Taxis, we took 40% market share from Uber in like 3 or 4 months. That's what a team can do when it's extremely motivated, extremely dialed in, and really just hungry to get out there and really make an impact in the world. And we did it in a lean way. We didn't do it, we didn't blow through a lot of money. We were operating in, some of the leanest conditions in the world. So I think there are those practices, and I think they're universal, and it'd be interesting to see with sort of, the next wave of startups. And you can already see it. I think one of the coolest ecosystems in the world right now is Colombia, and sort of the Rappi Mafia, and kind of all of the founders that are coming out of that ecosystem. And it'll be just amazing to see what everybody does, in that ecosystem as they start to scale up their businesses. And that's really what I'm most excited about at this point.
Absolutely. I mean, that's an incredible ecosystem. I agree. And just hearing you talk about those entrepreneurial experiences, the things that popped up to me were, focus, efficiency, and speed. I think to me as an entrepreneur, that's been one of the most important things, is the ability to adapt quickly and change, rapidly prototype things, whether it's your product, your service, or otherwise, your operation. So it's really interesting just to see sort of where your perspective has gotten after so much experience.
Yeah, it's just been phenomenal times, and it doesn't mean that we weren't operating in a fantastic way. In Uber, we were, very aggressively, and, oftentimes the goal in Uber was grow 100% this month. And so, you get into what we'd call vector-based planning. It's not, it's not sort of stock and flow planning or something like that, or, kind of incremental planning. It's literally vector. It's, we sort of compared each city launch with its own cohort. And then we looked at sort of, how was your growth curve relative to a set of cities that should be comparable. And I think the additional piece, that definitely I've added and a lot of folks have added on top of that, if you talk efficiency, is the vector that you're growing on, but within a certain envelope and, within that sort of efficiency metric. And that by adding that additional piece, you really give entrepreneurs this sort of broader mandate to do more portfolio management. And that's some of how I think I got to where I am currently with my teams, and sort of how we think about the opportunities out there in the world. We're really trying to manage our capital efficiently. And that it leads you to that. It leads you to really kind of placing your bets and doing your scale ups in the markets where you can really make things happen at the highest efficiency.
Well, throughout your career, you've shown this incredible dedication, and I know that you have also been an athlete as a runner, a cyclist, and a skier. Do you think that your dedication to business has sort of translated into those things? Are they related?
Yeah, I think there's something about endurance. Yeah, it is more a marathon than a sprint, maybe to use the cliche. And I think, we go through these cycles, right? We're all tightening belts. This is a very difficult sort of environment right now, kind of even before Silicon Valley Bank. And, I think just knowing that you have those reserves, that stamina in the tank, and you're going to kind of see things through that. There's a bunch of life skills in there that are super helpful when you're an entrepreneur.
With Shift One, what would you say is your hope for the future and further evolution of the company?
Yeah, we are right at a phase, we sort of began the company with this combination of tech and services. And I think just given kind of the environment of the pandemic, commercially, it made a lot of sense because people would be calling us, hey, we heard you guys can, get our plant filled back up. And, we sort of had, just a lot of pull from the market in that sense. And I think as we sort of transition into this environment that we're in, that we were talking about a minute ago, I think our evolution is really to be the HR platform of the future. HR doesn't have an Amazon.com kind of a platform. It doesn't have a Twitch. People are dealing with ERP and these technologies that are, frankly, just kind of 20 or 30 years of, relative, just kind of stagnation. There's not a lot of new stuff there. And so I think it's this unique opportunity to bring the best of mobile technology, some of the best e-commerce, yield management, travel algorithms, a lot of the just great, super highly scalable internet technologies, and bring them to bear in HR, in the people core part of the enterprise. So I think, for us, we really, that's what we're gunning for, is to be the new HR platform in the world.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I can, this show is called People Are the Answer. I really believe in people's ability to create impact. And so you potentially helping companies take care of their people. It just has tremendous value that it adds. And, some of it not even something that you can quantify. And so I think it's really exciting to hear that you'll be, moving in that direction as you grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are just so many opportunities, and, we talk about them all the time, like just our ability to provide better information for promotions and for upskilling. It's definitely a learning that we took from the gig economy because, frankly speaking, if you're running a state or a region or a city within a ride sharing platform, have a few 100,000 up to 1 million drivers, and you have their real-time performance, you have their historical performance, you have literally millions of data points on a driver that's been with you for a while. And it's just so much more robust than like emailing somebody a resume.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so, that's kind of, it's one of the starting points. Like our workforce, our clients know a lot more about their people. There's transparency there, but, if you believe in human potential and human opportunity and, want to have a meritocratic system, no better way than having an HR platform that really supports, the most accurate decisions possible. And, there's some other aspects like we've got, sort of a type of social sharing on the platform too. So workers also get visibility, and our professional workforce gets visibility into kind of what other workers are doing. And, you can follow people and you can you get a sense of all the great things that are happening out there. And we kind of, refer to sort of our kind of Twitch functionality for HR. Like it gives people a sense of the playbooks, how other people are getting ahead, how other people are performing really well, in just a really kind of virtuous way.
When you say like they get to see other people and follow them, are those people working in the same business, working in the same field?
All of the above.
Okay. So I wasn't sure if it was they're seeing people across sectors, across businesses, but because they're on your platform. Got it.
Yeah. Yep, they can. And as we continue to release new product there, we're going to open up even further. So you may be, a nurse in New Jersey and you're able to see what it's like to be a nurse in New Zealand, or maybe a nursing supervisor in New Zealand, and, just able to sort of get more visibility. And this really comes from, I think, also just kind of the background of kind of growing up in an underprivileged environment where, it takes, I think when you're coming out of that environment, what you're most lacking is sort of the visibility into kind of how the professions work and how a lot of, skilled and higher level jobs, what really the path is to get there. And there aren't even a lot of books written on sort of the paths of experience and how to progress in career ladders. So we think there's a lot of just really good modern technology and ways to do that. And we started to open some of those features up to our workforces.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the ability to see what the path to get there is like, and then also to see what the job's like in actuality. Somebody can go to school thinking they want one job, but then if they actually had a window into it, perhaps they would change their mind.
Right. Totally. Yeah, I'm not sure I like tax accounting.
Right. That sounds like a really fun one to watch.
To accountants, but you know what I mean, or whatever. Yeah, yep. Exactly.
Do you have any stories that come to mind where you really saw how your work could directly affect change? Especially with Shift One.
All kinds of stories. And just I think a big part of the impact that we've had so far is just being able to make work happen. And, one of our biggest impact is almost all of the people that we employ were previously unemployed. So, just in terms of like our ability to generate jobs at the entry level at kind of those first rungs on the ladder, that's been a big part of our impact. And just, any given month, the thousands and thousands of people that we provide paychecks for. I think what we are seeing increasingly is just, our platform is kind of coming into its own in terms of helping employers to get more efficient. And those, I think, particularly in this market, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, the impact is just tremendous because, we're talking, these end up being extra shifts, extra lines, extra, kind of productive capacity in the enterprise. and just a real kind of step change in efficiency. And it's just goodness all the way around. It's obviously win-win for the workforce. They're able to sort of get a little bit of additional flexibility, particularly with smart scheduling, with some of our features there. For the employer, they're able to kind of deploy their workers better. And some of that part of where we're sort of leading with some of our clients is making that sort of all keyed to productivity, meaning the schedule is balanced based on what the expected needs are of that particular shift or that particular day, and the individual productivity, performance, talents of the team that we're able to put together. So we have kind of a core team, and then we have resources on the margins that are coming in or taking a shift off. And by doing that, we're just able to make the whole kind of team and enterprise that much more efficient. So there's a really big impact there. And, as I say, like a lot of this this isn't super new in terms of, we're talking yield management, largely yield management technologies, which have kind of been around since American Airlines kind of pioneered a bunch of yield management, back in the 90s. That's how old some of the core technologies are. But, they're pretty much non-existent in the HR space. So we think the ability to go into a really large company and make its workforce 10%, 20% more efficient is really sort of where we see our biggest value right now. It's a little different from, a year and a half ago, we would have been like, we're trying to find 200 extra workers for plant X, flying them in or, doing whatever, doing crash course, training, upskilling. Now things are, we've moved on, I think, as a country. And I think, there's a big upskilling component too, because largely what we've seen is, on all kinds of verticals and parts of the economy, people are really trying to engineer out the entry-level jobs. If you go into a manufacturing plant, it's the unskilled workers who are lifting stuff, putting it on lines, taking it off lines, putting it into boxes. The unskilled work is largely going away. People are putting robots in to do that. And so, that said, that means that then the bottleneck moves from the unskilled work to the skilled work. And then it's, we need skilled machine operators because now we're that much more efficient on everything else. And we need robotics technicians to fly in, do preventive maintenance and repair work on the robots. So, we've definitely seen that need. And I think that's sort of, we do some of the upskilling already, but I think, if you look at kind of a roadmap for the next year or so, we've got a lot more upskilling features and functionality coming out as well.
Yeah, it's again excited to see how things evolve. And over your career, have you had anyone that you've considered a mentor?
All kinds, tons of mentors. Yeah, and all different levels. I think you can learn really from anyone at any level around you. In many different ways. Lots of folks. Yeah.
Yeah. If you'd like, you can ask me a question.
Yeah. I would love to hear your motivation for the show and sort of the impact that you guys have been seeing with the show. If you can share anything about your experience with the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Really, the goal for me is to shine a spotlight on people that are doing incredible work and the incredible work that they are doing that is creating impact. And, additionally, I wanted to sort of establish a voice for myself, sort of in the public, and also allow myself to have an opportunity to create some content that doesn't have to deal directly with the barriers of entry that Hollywood has, that I've dealt with in some of my film production work. And yeah, there's so many good things happening in the world, but our media is so negatively focused. And so it was just really important to me to have something that, made people realize that there's just so much good. And I've been fortunate to meet a lot of great people through it as well, whether it's people that have been on the show or people that have been listeners. And it's something that I hope to continue to grow and expand the audience for, just to be able to get these messages out.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. And, by all means, if there's anything I can ever do to help, let me know. I think it's it's a relatively small community of entrepreneurs that are having a lot of social impact. I think the best case scenario is our product is just fundamentally socially beneficial. I think it's one of the best ways to have impact. But I recognize that social change is hard, and it's almost it's a complexity, I think, to any of us, just in terms of how we are going to deploy our technology in the world, how to affect change at a broad scale.
I really liked what you said in terms of showing people sort of how their work is already creating positive impact. And there's definitely people I've reached out to be on the show before that, like, I hadn't really considered myself an innovator in social impact. And I'm, kind of explain to them, well, you are, because of X, Y, and Z. You're making all of this incredible change that is affecting a lot of lives positively. Yes, it can be a tough balance in terms of business and impact, but I think if your business has the right values at its core that it makes its decisions by, generally it'll take you in the right direction.
Absolutely.
So if everything were to end tomorrow, what have you been most proud of?
Oh boy. Aside from family, professionally, definitely the teams and companies that I've been a part of. I think one of the additional impacts that I've been able to have, and I can look back on at this point in my career, is the number of founders and CEOs that used to be general managers or folks on my team that I've had the pleasure to work with and help mentor and help develop. I think it's my way of paying back. I do a little bit of investing, but for the most part, I'm out there in the world building companies, and I really see, as far as the ecosystem, I see my biggest impact in helping get new founders started. It's really
investing in people.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so, and we have really healthy ecosystems. The quote unquote Uber mafia is very strong. There's a 99 Taxis mafia. There are a ton of founders that came out of 99 Taxis, founders, CEOs, and senior execs in tech companies and otherwise. And the Rappi mafia is just incredible.
Cool to see how some joint success and learning experiences can just sprout so many things and so much growth. So the one question that I always make sure to ask, if you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
Sure. I think I as much as I talk about the entrepreneurial journey being about established tech, I think we need more primary R&D. And I think particularly on systems that can be really kind of fundamentally change and become the next platform for innovation. And it's been a while. We're a little bit, we're very late in internet and mobile technologies. And we haven't really seen a platform since. And I think government could play a very active role there. I think it almost has to with some of the technologies. I think in particular, if you look at space technologies, which is just such a clear example. If you look at clean tech, government is going to be doing quite a bit with some of the latest legislation. It's sort of on that level, and it could be more concerted. There's sort of the EU and the US are kind of never really aligned on major deep tech initiatives. And I just think there's so much wasted human potential in the world because we're not better at these things. Or even if we had competition, if the competition were leading the way the space race led to all kinds of innovation 50 years ago. It's sort of, I miss that. I think we're, as much as it's amazing, and a lot of us have sort of grown up in our careers during the internet age, really kind of missing that next thing.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing that. And it's been awesome learning about your career and your work. And I'm sure everyone listening would love to learn more. How can people support you and your impact?
Yeah, it's on so many different levels. So feel free, they can certainly reach out to me on social media. LinkedIn is one of the easiest ways, on our website, any number of ways. Really, it is really about networking and sort of putting people into, the right kind of context and making connections where I can. And it's really hard to say what that might be, whether it's, a founder friend of mine or an investor or, potential clients, whatever, potentially you think the synergy might be, just reach out, and I'm always happy to respond if I can help in any way.
Well, thanks again so much for joining me. Really appreciate it, Jason, and wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with friends, and reviews or subscriptions on your favorite platforms go a long way to help the show grow. I want to share these incredible people and their remarkable work with as many others as possible. Thanks for your support. For more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.